Hello and welcome to the Biography Shorties. I am your narrator, Frank Avella. Here we will be covering the short biography of the bold, brave, and heroic Joan of Arc. We will be covering several different topics, so let's begin with the first section, which is an introduction. We'll get right to it. First off, Joan was a martyr, saint, and military leader. She has become a ubiquitous part of popular culture, as she is found in various movies, TV series, and even video games. Joan of Arc, in particular, is a French heroine. She is annually celebrated in France, and the Feast of Joan of Arc is celebrated every 30th of May. The French are most grateful for the fact that she has led the French to many victories during the 100 Years' War. While she didn't really engage in battle, she served mainly as an inspirational figure. It ended badly for Joan, as she was burned at the stake for being a heretic. Joan was eventually canonized as a Roman Catholic saint in 1920, 500 years after her death. Joan is included in the recognized list of Catholic saints. The next section that we will explore is the early life of Joan of Arc. Joan was born in 1412 in Domremy, France. Domremy was a small village which was then in the French part of the county of Bar. Joan of Arc's parents were farmers. There are conflicting stories about whether or not her parents actually owned land. Her dad was also a tax collector. Her village was routinely raided and once burned, ironically. Joan's village was loyal to the French crown, but surrounded by pro-Burgundian lands. Joan learned her religious devotion to God from her mother. As a youth, she tended to animals and was a seamstress. She remained close to home and tried to learn as many new skills as she could from her mother. The next section is the 100 Years' War. The 100 Years' War was fought between the French and the English. The 100 Years' War actually lasted about 116 years. After several big English victories, the Treaty of Troyes was signed, which was an agreement that King Henry V of England and his heirs would inherit the French crown upon the death of King Charles VI of France. Then King Henry dies and his infant son is left as heir to the throne, and king to both English and French realms. The French wanted their King Charles' son, Charles VII, to take over. With confidence and support, Charles aims to take back the throne of France. While all this is happening, Joan of Arc is living a pious life. Later on, she will be examined by clergy as to how devoted to God she actually was. The next section is Joan's relationship with Charles VII. Joan of Arc had a vision of herself saving France. Her vision became more vivid as Saint Michael and Saint Catherine came to her in her dreams. These visions specifically instructed her to contact the Dauphin Charles, meaning expected heir to the throne. The people were behind Joan, and so Commander Baudricourt was compelled to bring her to Charles. Baudricourt gave her an escort and a horse to meet with Charles. She took this 11-day journey through the dangerous territory. Charles is skeptical of Joan at first, so he dresses in disguise. But Joan picks him out from a crowd. When Charles speaks to Joan, she knows details of his personal prayers. Charles' clergy examine Joan, and she is found to be devoted to God. Continuing, we come upon the next section, the Battle of Orleans. At first, Charles allows Joan of Arc to accompany his army to the Battle of Orleans. At the battle, Joan was wounded. However, she was still able to make her way to the front of the army and lead the final attack on the English fortifications. The soldiers were absolutely behind her. In Orleans, the French had beaten the so-called invincible English army in a series of battles. The French were able to plant their flag and show the world that they could go toe-to-toe with the British. At this point, Joan began to push Charles to taking the crown. Charles's army continued to push further and further into English and Burgundian territory, and Charles eventually was crowned King Charles VII. At the crowning, Joan of Arc was visibly at his side. The next section is her trial and death. In 1430, Joan of Arc was taken captive by the Burgundians. She was ordered by Charles to accompany the French assault against them, but she fell off her horse and was taken captive. Months later, the English made a deal to buy the captive Joan from the Burgundians. Joan was exchanged to the English for the price of 10,000 francs. Charles was made aware of the situation, but made no attempt to save her. The English then turned Joan of Arc over to the church. They in turn tried her for heresy. Heresy meant not adhering to the core Christian beliefs. Joan was eventually burned at the stake in Rouen on May 29, 1413. Joan has always maintained her claim of innocence. And to the last section, the fun facts. Joan of Arc was not actually from a place called Arc. Her father's name is d'Arc. Next, modern doctors today think that she may have suffered from mental illness. This would explain a lot. They believe she suffered from epilepsy and schizophrenia. Joan of Arc was technically burned at the stake for dressing like a man, which was a crime in the Old English Church back in that time. Remember, they could not get her to confess on other crimes. Here's a quote attributed to Joan of Arc. "To sacrifice what you are and to live without belief, that is a fate more terrible than dying." So that was basically everything you ever needed to know about Joan of Arc. Be sure to check out the next biography short on Marie Curie. Also, make sure to subscribe to this channel. Click the bell on the subscribe icon to get notifications. Please like and share the video, and most importantly, check the description for links to resources as well.